Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom. Mir, ni hao. Buenos dias, buenos tardes, hasiche, aquaba, government, what up, though? This is a discourse on affirmations in the Melange experience, mixed heritage, earth experience. It is a collection of words, writings, speeches that come from the many cultures and traditions and languages of the earth. These are articulated within English translations, but they come from all around the earth, from different time periods, from different brethren of different walks. And so these are shared as a guidance for cultivating, building, recognizing, strengthening, nurturing a community, an earth community, and particularly a mixed heritage community. That's the nature of earth, to be honest, and particularly with mixed heritage brethren. We can even say mixed race brethren. So that's what this is. It's actually, to be honest, intended, shared, offered, initiated, established as a constitution, a political constitution for mixed race brethren of earth. So that's what this is. So before I go further, well, what I plan to do is read it, but before I read it, talk about it, and before I talk about it, introduce myself. Hi, my name is Peter Johansson, OCC. I'm also known as Dzuriji. That is my spiritual name. Dzuriji is a confluence of two languages, specifically, particularly. Dzuri means rock in Hebrew. That is my Hebrew name, Dzuri ben Yochanan. And it means the same thing as Peter. G is an appellation, a suffix that is applied towards someone who is endeared. It means an endeared one, a beloved. So the literal translation of Dzuriji is beloved rock, an endearing rock. So that's my spiritual name. I am a spiritual teacher and retired spiritual diplomat. I work with Asona Ashram. We do Kumbaya, and we share songs, stories, rituals, and ethics of the earth. My particular expertise, my specialty, is scriptural reasoning. I study scriptures for a long time, and I study the teachings for peace and love and reconciliation, getting along. I also study the teachings for baga, and I study how those teachings for a nice, get along, happy, not necessarily happy, but happiness is involved, peace, reconciliation, cooperation, supersede the teachings of violence, revenge, retribution, and further. So that's my vocation. And now at this point, I'm focused on just sharing songs and stories, because those are often the most effective way of communicating these teachings. So that's what I do, best as I can. Meanwhile, in this process of my career of spiritual diplomacy, in doing these studies, I write some things, and I particularly put together some things. And one of the things that I began doing many years ago is doing scriptural reasoning exercises or projects. An example would be, or is, taking a topic like healing, and then just study what the different scriptures teach about healing, particularly the prominent teachings, the explicit, like plain and spoken teachings about healing, and then put that together and I compare it, what's going on here. So I do that for many years on many different topics, and eventually, as I do this, I become increasingly proximate with my personal experience, increasingly specific, particularly including and pertaining to the mixed race experience. So I began doing a number of scriptural reasoning projects, specifically, particularly on the topic and the experience of being mixed race. And actually, I do one specifically on that, mixed race. That involves a certain amount of interpretation because the explicit articulations are comparatively modest in terms of frequency in the scriptural reasoning realm in the different scriptures. What scriptures am I talking about? How about that? Well, first, in terms of categorizing and talking about the religions, obviously there are countless thousands, over thousands, many thousands of religions on this earth, and all the different factions and denominations and everything else like that. So what do we identify as like Holy Scripture? So recognizing that, what we can also recognize is that there are a few religious traditions, diaspora, or actually that we can use that word. There are only a comparatively few number of religious diaspora, religious communities, religious traditions that have communities of brethren who live in the vast regions of this earth. And there are about maybe a dozen thereabouts. And that tends to correlate, or that tends to be the same as the number of calendars that there are, predominant calendars, 12 thereabouts calendars. So from that we look at those 12 traditions. What are those 12 traditions? Well, it's not necessarily specifically 12, but we can talk about Judaism, the tradition of Israel, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Chinese tradition, Islam, Christian tradition, although there are a number of calendars within Christian tradition as they are within a number of these traditions. Sikh tradition, Zoroastrianism, tradition, native tradition, particularly the Mayan calendar, but just native tradition in general around the earth, respectively. And then also Baha'i. I think I named 11 right there. Then we can look at Earth as a general phenomenon, what we do, but that's somewhat beside the point. So anyways, we look at these different traditions and say, okay, what about the Holy Scriptures in each of these different traditions? So here with the Sona Ashram, we recognize 6 Holy Scriptures, 6 categories, six religions with Holy Scriptures as the foundation, or like what we refer to as the Earth Constitution. So those scriptures are the Torah of Israeli tradition, the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindu tradition, the Digha Nikaya and the Dhammapada of Buddhist tradition, the Gospels of Christian tradition, the Quran of Islamic tradition, and the Tao Te Ching of Chinese tradition. Now, many who have some knowledge about these scriptures and religiosity may say, wait a minute, that's not the most authoritative book or scripture from that tradition. For example, Bhagavad Gita within Hindu tradition. There are the Upanishads and there's the Rig Veda that are increasingly authoritative within Hindu tradition. Yet the consideration is that the Bhagavad Gita is increasingly accessible and known within Hindu community, and further provides a proficient summarization of the teachings within the Upanishads. I've yet to read all the Upanishads, disclaimer. But I do read a fair amount of the Upanishads, and it is there a lot of it is generally included within the summarization of the Bhagavad Gita. But then also the Vedas. Now I have read fewer of the Vedas, so I'm relying upon what is shared by other scholars accordingly. But generally speaking, the Bhagavad Gita is recognized as a proficient synopsis and summarization of the teachings of the Rig Veda and Vedas and the Upanishads, in addition to the other scriptures that are, well, not as authoritative even as the Bhagavad Gita. So there it is with that. Digha Nikaya Dhammapada of Buddhist tradition is that the most authoritative. That's arguable because there are a number of different lineages within Buddhism, and each of those lineages have different priorities concerning the scriptural authoritarianism of the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of the Buddhist tradition, or the Buddhist canon of of holy scriptures. We here, admittedly, are increasingly invested within the Theravada lineage of Buddhism, which doesn't emphasize scriptures hardly at all. It's a matter of finding a teacher and practicing. That being said, in either respect, the Abhidhamma is most likely or most readily considered the most authoritative. I say arguably, because there's not a specific lineage or linearity in terms of authoritarianism of Buddhist scriptures, as it is in other traditions. But Abhidhamma may be considered the most authoritative because it is the specific direct instruction that the Buddha provides to the Sangha, and those who take the vow of the Bodhisattva. I should be mindful of describing it in that manner, but those who take the vow to lead the life of monasticism and dedication that the Buddha prescribes for being bodhisattvas. So that's like the highest scriptural teachings. However, the Digha Nikaya, otherwise known as the long discourses that the Buddha provides a very proficient articulation of the teachings of the Buddha, particularly to the laity, but even further and extensive to the Sangha and Brahmins and further. The Dhammapada, it may be considered increasingly accessible. It shares the teachings, but perhaps less I won't say less, but there it is. So, but either way, there's an absence of a linearity when it comes to the authoritarianism within the scriptural heritage of Buddhist tradition. Gospels within Christian tradition, that's pretty much the authority. We can talk about the Tanakh, but that's getting into a little bit different waters at that point. The Tanakh is the collection of the three writings from Israeli tradition, often referred to as the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. That includes Torah, but as well as the prophets and the writings. So Christian tradition very much includes that within the Christian practice, but in terms of being authoritarianism, Jesus is absent. Jesus arrives after those writings, and so much of Christianity focuses specifically and predominantly on the Gospels and then the writings of the apostles of Jesus, which many very strongly communicate as being or believe as being equally authoritative as the Gospels, but at the same time, it's also, other than the word that Jesus provides specifically, it's the word of his apostles. So many also believe that it is contextualized accordingly. So we focus on the Gospels. With all the biases that are involved in just life. Quran within Islam, that's the predominant text. Torah within Israeli tradition, yeah, right. Did I miss that? No. But okay, first, Quran of Islam, that's easily the most authoritative text in Islamic tradition. Tao Te Ching within Chinese tradition. Again, similarly as within Buddhism, there's an absence of like a linearity, a linear hierarchy of authoritarianism within Chinese, the Chinese canon of holy scriptures, as my modest knowledge has awareness of. There are holy scriptures that precede the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, including I Ching, and additionally, from which teachings that Lao Tzu provides are derived and shared. That being said, there is a classic school of thought and guidance that is precipitated by Lao Tzu, wherein many of the prominent teachers of Chinese tradition, spirituality, religiosity, we can arguably say as well, emerge or build from, including Confucius and Mencius. And I'm utilizing comparatively westernized terminologies. That's my familiarity, and that's also the method of communication at the moment here. In terms of me speaking English and to an predominantly speaking English audience at the moment. So those are the scriptures that we're working with. Again, it's not all the 12 that I mentioned in terms of the calendars, but it's a matter of recognizing those scriptures as a foundation that influence the other 12 predominantly. Wow, I'm getting a whole explanation about this without even getting to the immediate joint here. But those are the scriptures that we're working with when we're talking about scriptural reasoning. So I do that for nearly 20 years at this point, since I graduated from law school. and I put together. I do that for a while, and again, I do it on topical, different topics for different purposes of study and understanding activism, and additionally advocating for specific experiences of reconciliation amidst contemporary conditions. And again, like I said, eventually, like I gravitate and I move toward closer to home, and sharing topics about popping collars, about being mixed, and the foundation, the support, the advocacy, the guidance for the experience of being mixed. So after all those exercises, and amidst my additional work in the mixed race field of advocacy, organizing, community, particularly advocating and organizing administration, and amidst our global diaspora, I recognize that it's beneficial to have like a political compact, but rather than just the expression of a contemporary philosophy, the consideration is sharing the elements of our heritage of Earth, from the different cultures, the different leaders and teachers and sages and prophets of our collective Earth heritage, and bringing those teachings together, those articulations, those messages together, to form an effective political compact. That the words, the expressions, the experience, the solidarity, the commitment that we share in a political compact, rather than articulating through our words, because any word that we speak is from a language that has bias and is imbalanced within our collective experience. Go to our teachers and our sages and our prophets and our ancestors, and bring those words together and let that be the political compact. So that's what I do. Now, the methodology of like selecting which words, how to do all that and everything else, I actually kept it very simple. Much of this is actually built from a preceding scriptural reasoning project. And in that initial scriptural reasoning project, I basically look at the main scriptures that I just mentioned, but I also look at additional scriptures. The Sri Guru Granth Sahib from Sikhi tradition, the Kordeya Vesta from Zarathustrian tradition, the Tadvarta Sutra from Jain tradition, and the Kitabi Akdas from Baha'i tradition. All the additional traditions that I mentioned in terms of the calendars. I'm trying to think there's any of the others. I go to, well, I'll get to them. So I go to those scriptures, and basically all I do is identify or just transcribe the opening passages of each one. It's a beginning. How does each scripture begin? What does it teach at its very beginning? That was the preceding scriptural reasoning project that I previously do. And so when I think to myself about how to construct a political compact from these teachings, from these traditions, that's how many books we're dealing with right there. And actually there's some further books that are absent from the middle of the shelf. But like from all those books, how are you going to put together a wee bit of a compact that's succinct? Like where do you begin with that? So I say, where do you begin with that? How about at the beginning? And just build from what we already did, which is that project on the opening passages of each scripture. So that's what I do. All I do is like, wait, why make it hard? Keep it simple. So I just take each of those opening passages because that's appropriate. This is a new beginning, a new political entity, phenomena, experience, cooperation, bond that is being cultivated. So it's appropriate to go to the beginning because this is an introduction for us to ourselves. So very apropos. So that's what I do. Take the beginning, opening passage of each of these scriptures and just let it speak for itself. Now, that said, how does one... Actually, not before we get to that. Well, what about those other traditions that don't got them scriptures? They ain't got too much about them book learning. Yes. So, with other traditions, Native, African, European, where there's an absence of a generally categorically recognized scripture that represents, that teaches, that guides the specific community, ethnic culture, and otherwise. Finding some type of representative document that does, to some estimable, proximable way. So that's what I do. From my knowledge, my modest knowledge about world history, contemporary and ancient, I identify some leaders and some leading conditions wherein there are documents, messages, speeches, even a poem that are shared, that are a fair representation, if not the representation or the teaching from each of these traditions. So there are a few of these that are included within this sequence of Holy Scriptures. So some of these inclusions are very recent and contemporary, within the past century, even within the past decade or two, on one occasion, I think, or actually a couple occasions. But even then, it's an articulation of an ancient experience, particularly indigenous. So that was the methodology. It was a preceding project, scriptural reasoning, identifying a topic, opening passages of scriptures, wanting to find or put together a political compact, considering that the best way of doing that at this moment is just collecting the teachings that were already provided and introducing ourselves to ourselves through our ancestors, our forebears, and then including teachings and articulations from traditions and communities that that abstain from emphasizing the written word, and including that within the conversation. And then from that there was a selection. And when I did that, usually, again, I focused on that notion of beginning, and that can be evident. I said, what leader do I look to when in the community that abstains from having a specific scripture? How do I determine what leader? Again, I draw from my personal awareness, so there's bias there. But then I also look at where is there what I'm familiar with is in terms of the experience of beginning in each of these experiences. So some of the experiences is the beginning of a nation. Some of this is the beginning of a personal journey. Some of this is the beginning of a relationship between communities. So, but there's some experience. Some of these are creation narratives. So that's the methodology in terms of identifying what to include in that respect. So with all these passages identified, then it's a matter of okay, so what's the sequence? Which one goes first? What's the rule for which one? Is it geography? Is it alphabetical order? Can't do it that way. Is it chronologically? So what I do is I consider topically, and by that I mean what I endeavor to do in terms of the sequence of putting these passages, bringing these passages together, is to basically is to tell a story, and to consider what is said in each of these passages, and then how do those elements become linear, follow or connect with each other, relate with each other, and how can this articulate a story, a narrative, a complete narrative altogether. So that might seem rather involved, perhaps rather contrived, perhaps rather impious, but that's what I genuinely that's what I genuinely endeavor. But that's what I endeavor in terms of a genuine articulation or genuine proclamation of the beginning of the political compact of our mixed race global diaspora. So that's the basic gist of this joint. This takes about I have something further to share. To be honest, it's still somewhat under construction because it's gone through a process of addition and adaptation through the years. This was put together initially about maybe 4 years ago, 4 years ago. And so since there have been some adaptations, like I said, and some additions, and still, there have been some number of different printings of this. And so the most recent version of this has yet to be printed out proper. So there is some back and forth that is necessary. Now, that being said, that's the initial portion of this sequence. I'm looking at the clock at the moment because I'm calculating how much daylight we still got, like decent. I think we still got half an hour, and we may need all of it because I'm doing my talking now. I've been at it for nearly half. And then this takes about 20, 30. So I'm almost done with this introduction part. So the idea is a story. All the portions, all the passages have something to do with beginning. Either it's literally the beginning of the Holy Scripture itself, or it's on some topic of beginning, personal, communal, societal, national, and further. So some experience of beginning, and then it's aligned with the intention of sharing a narrative. So I'm going to give a preview of the people, the teachers that share these writings, and then give some kind of like interpretation of the narrative before I read this, so that it can be within the mindset as one listens to this. As you listen to this, oh lucky yo, lucky yo, lucky yo. All right. Can I be serious? Like, seriously. Can one be lighthearted? Like, lighthearted. Balance, yeah? So, also, and such. That being said, the people that share this, and then like the intended narrative, or like the interpreted narrative, because it's not a matter of me saying something; it's just like looking at it and then how to put it together, how does it make sense? So, the people who are included, I'm saying, I didn't even count how many there are. So, wait, before I do this, I'll say this. There are 4 sections to the entirety of this. The first section are these writings. Now, that's the majority. That's the main part of this. And God willing, I'll finish that whilst there's still daylight. That's my priority at the moment. And not worry too much about the do of dread. That it came out right. I ain't gonna try it again though. So that's the main section at this moment, or of this political compact, this Constitution. The second section of this compact is another compilation of original writings that I share specifically on the experience of being mixed race. I often refer to it as mélanger, and mélanger does have a distinction, but sometimes initially when I utilize the term mélanger, it's just in a general way or thereabouts. But at this point, mélanger specifically has it's a type of mix. It's any kind of ethnic experience, but it's a further, like, I don't want to say higher, but like it's a further commitment and stricter commitment towards the mixed experience, particularly ethically. So there's that. That's the second section. The third section is an exercise. Well, okay. So the third section is an exercise of meditation, a guided meditation called Natural Mystic Samadhi, which may be a wee bit pushing this Constitution in a secular mindset, comfort zone, proclivities, what have you. But it's here because it's here. So that's the third section. It's not a lot, but it's here. Fourth section is another sequence. That just has some brief, it has a poem about our rivers, It also has a some other, like a blessing and some other things as well. Actually, the way I can describe it is this. The first part of this is these writings that come from our ancestors, prophets and sages and teachers. The second part is comparatively contemporary, recent, and even original works that specifically speak to the mixed race experience, to kind of bring it together and provide it some perspective, context, but also immediacy, and kind of just like, again, like I said, bring it together. So those are the two parts of this joint. The first part, again, it takes about 20 minutes thereabouts, and the second part maybe about 5-10 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. Now, that being said, I'm going to say the names again. All right. There's actually 3 versions of this joint, and it's the same text, but it's a matter of the length. Because I personally recite this every week on Fridays after Jummah, before Shabbat. That's just part of my repertoire, my routine. It's actually, I find it helpful. Some might find it rather disagreeable, but we can talk about it. All right. So there are 3 versions of this. There's this, what I'm reading at this moment, or preparing to read, is the middle version. All right. All right. This is the middle version. And again, like I said, it's about 20-30 minutes thereabouts, maybe a little bit longer. There's a short version, which is maybe about 5 minutes in recitation. So, and it's just like an abbreviated version of each passage, so that it can be read in a very succinct way, kind of like a mantra, or just like a quick affirmation, which is also beneficial. Then there's a long version, because I actually took longer initially in the initial endeavor of this project. I utilized comparatively longer excerpts of the passages. So the longer versions involve about an hour, over an hour, maybe over an hour and a quarter of reading, and so that can be somewhat heavy, even for me, on a regular basis at this moment. So that is shared on comparatively special occasions or appropriate occasions. There's a distinction. So anyways, again, this is the middle length version. Now, that being said, who done that bad talking? I'll list the names here. This is the sequence of the writings. I'll just say the names, then I'll give some a context about who these people are, who these brethren, ancestors, teachers, and sages and prophets are. Dag Hammarskjöld, Kwame Nkrumah, Che Guevara, Lao Tzu, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Moshe Rabbeinu, Zarathustra, Chief James Billy, Saint Matthew, the Buddha, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Baha'u'llah, the Rishis, Tadvarta Sutra, or Mahavira, Davi Kopanawa Yanomami, and the Sovereign Confederation of Melange. The Sovereign Confederation of Melange is actually the name of the federation for which this constitution is connected. So those are the authors of these writings. Dag Hammarskjöld is the previous Secretary General of the United Nations. He is from Sweden. He is a very championed diplomat and statesman from Sweden. I think serving as high as the Ministry of the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Sweden before he's selected as the Secretary General, the head chief of the United Nations in its very early stages of building. And he's well renowned within the UN system. He actually dies in the line of service in a plane crash when he's out in the field doing his work as UN Secretary General. Dag Hammarskjöld. It's a poem from his personal memoirs that is shared. That's how this constitution begins. The next is Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is the first president of the independent nation of Ghana after it achieves decolonization. So, within which Kwame Nkrumah plays a leading role, a very Pan-African leader, and his is the second inclusion in this sequence. It is his inaugural address, his inaugural presidential address. The next author is Che Guevara. Che Guevara is the celebrated revolutionary from Cuba in the land of Taino. And this is an address that he makes towards the United Nations about Cuba, the nation of Cuba, after it is officially established, and emphasizing the interest of Cuba for peace. The next author is Lao Tzu. This is the beginning passage of the Tao Te Ching. The next author is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is the opening passage of the Quran. It is the Fatiha. I think in this middle length version, the entirety of the Fatiha is included. So the next author is Moshe Rabbeinu. It is the opening of the Torah. Bereshit, creation, in the beginning. The next author is Zarathustra. It is the opening passage of the I have to remind myself because there are a number of different iterations of this that I do, so I want to be specific and accurate. It is the beginning of the Zendavesta, but yeah, that's it. All right, simple. Then the next author is Chief James Billy from Muskoki tradition, Miccosukee, who native brethren of this land, and it is the Seminole nation. It is the Seminole traditional narrative concerning creation, the creation narrative. The next author is Saint Matthew, the author of the Gospel of Saint Matthew. It is the opening of the Gospel of Christianity. The next author is the Buddha. It is the beginning of the Dhammapada. So, in deciding between the Digha Nikaya and the Dhammapada, which one to include here, it is decided that the Dhammapada is increasingly, again, accessible and appropriate and informative, because there's a beneficial teaching that's shared in the opening of the Dhammapada, particularly for a beginner, compared to a kind of basic kind of narrative within the Brahmajala Sutta that begins the Digha Nikaya. So it's the opening passage of the Dhammapada. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is the next author, and it is the opening of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, including the Japji Sahib and the first stanza. The next author is Baha'u'llah. It is the opening of the Kitab Yaqdas. The next author, I say here the Rishis because that's my most proximate understanding or attribution to the authors of the Upanishads. This is not the Vedas. It's not even the Bhagavad Gita. It's the Upanishads. Because, again, when thinking about sharing the opening for the Bhagavad Gita, again, it's less informative and it's less indicative of what the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are. It begins with the actually the foes or the rivals or the counterparts of Arjuna having a discussion about the battle, and so it's a very matter-of-fact thing, which in itself is revealing to like a next level kind of audience or participant or study. But for a beginner, the opening of the Chandogya Upanishads is increasingly informative and directive in a productive way, in my estimation, to the beginner reader. So that's what is included here. Then there is one thing that I have to go back and forth for is the opening of the Tadvarta Sutra from Jain tradition, as well as an articulation of the Anarvatas of Jain tradition. So the Tadvarta Sutta is an actual holy scripture of the Jain tradition. My familiarity with the hierarchy of authoritarianism within the Jain canon of holy scriptures is comparatively modest. I think the Tadvarta Sutta abstains from being the epitome or at the top of that hierarchy. However, it is substantial, and the teaching that it provides is also considerably substantial as well, particularly for a beginner. And then the next author is Davi Kopanawa Yanomami, who is a shaman of the Yanomami tribe within the rainforest of the Western Hemisphere. And the address that he shares is the opening, or the preface of a book that he articulates to a book that is written with him. It's basically the culmination of years of work with the Yanomami tribe and an anthropologist. The anthropologist eventually writing like a summary and articulation of the experience of the Yanomami people, and Davi Kopanawa Yanomami directly articulating this introduction to the book accordingly. So that's what the passage is. And then that's the conclusion of this sequence, and then it goes into the original writings specifically pertaining to the mixed race experience. And I think what I might do is maintain the continuity of this recording, and whilst working with the natural light, we may have to utilize some of the electricity that is amidst us. So, there it is. Do I, at this moment, precipitate that? It may be prudent. I already walk like an old guy. Hee-haw. So, that's the introduction. I'll say like an interpretation of the narrative. So those are the authors. Those are some of the backgrounds of the authors and what the passages articulate. So part of the interpretation of the sequence of these narratives. Like, what is the story that is being told through the compilation, through the telling of this? I'll say what I interpret it personally as. It is a man, and it's a being, a person, a being, who is articulating a certain amount of self-awareness and a searching. And very, very simply, from that we have a nation that is emerging as a new entity, and working for cohesion and longevity, and that continues into a proclamation from a nascent nation in its relationship with the other nations of this earth, and communicating what the intentionalities and interests are. And then from there, we kind of have a time warp back into the antiquity, and a reminder and a guidance about the nature of the earth, the nature of the universe, and our purpose intrinsically herein. And from there, there is in that time warp, in considering the nature of the universe, we begin to the concept, the presence of God, is introduced into the narrative, because that is our experience of Earth, and that continues, and from that introduction of the presence of God, then we have a multitude of articulations of the narrative of creation, the creation narrative, and from that we have the description of the emergence from that narrative of creation, the emergence of an individual, a celebrated individual with auspicious prospects. And amidst that emergence of an individual with auspicious prospects, there is also the further reminder of the auspiciousness within each of us. We are each that auspicious individual with auspicious prospects. And that auspiciousness emerges from our mindfulness, concentration, intentionality, discipline. And from there we begin to receive guidance. From that concentration, from the mindfulness, from the discipline, we receive communication and guidance, purpose, direction. And that's how this continues with different articulations of that guidance, that direction. And it culminates in the articulation, the proclamation that such an awakening, such a path occurs through intentionality and through spontaneousness, for lack of a better word. And it is maintained through harmonious behavior. The sequence concludes by a humble. It's somewhat inaccurate for me to describe it as humble. It's intrinsically extremely humble, but it directly is somewhat authoritative. But altogether, it is a proclamation of modesty, a reminder of modesty to the immodest. When we can fathom that, and I'll leave it at that. It's a reminder of of modesty to the immodest. That's the conclusion of that narrative, and my interpretation thereof, at least. Then from there, it goes on to the our original writings specifically concerning our mixed race experience. So with that said, here we go. When I read these, also just as a side note, when I read these, my intention, my methodology is actually just to read the text, to abstain from articulating the author or the source or anything else, because in this particular exercise, that seems to take away from the linearity that is intended, and some might perceive that as inappropriate, the intentionality of the linearity. However, it is what it is. And I don't mean to say that in a disrespectful, dismissive, flippant way, but at the same time, there's only so many kind of like disclaimers and everything else, accommodations that can be made, and there's certain legitimacy. There is recognition of the concerns about bringing scriptures together and just reading it in a sequence and offering it as like a single kind of thing, whatever. There's understanding about the concerns of that, what the actual rules are within each tradition about doing that. Less knowledge of directly, to be honest. However, at the same time, this is done with genuine dedication towards truth and reconciliation, which is emphasized and prioritized within each of these scriptures. So it is in that spirit that this is shared. Again, for me, always to the best of my ability. So I am going to say a blessing before I read these, and that's a blessing also for the tea, because between each of these writings, I do take a sip, customarily, just because it's beneficial for the voice. But also there is a certain pause within each one, so that helps. So it's not necessarily well, it is what it is. So that being said, here's the blessing. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahu Akbar. Dao ka dao, fei chang dao, ming ka ming, fei chang ming ja. Deus noster, qui es in cieli, sanctificato nomen tuum, vahegu sanam. Baruch ata Elohim, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kasanu ba mitzvotav v'tzivan l'sok b'rovai Torah. Amen. Baruch atah Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafim. Amen. Kyrie eleison. Sivomastu save jigatehim. Save sata bavontu sukitata. Fakabiyum. Aquaba upendo na amani. Fikiri inesalami. Chintadan permin. Libov me wumajika. Ubuntu shabon fekakom. Sheshe. Kamosanina. Damo arigato. Pedoma yelo bogato. Tokadok shingun. Gomen God, we thank you for all your blessings. Adajami adafalami aho. Om shanti shanti shanti. Amen. For those who take note, yes, I said Borei Peri because I have yet to learn the blessing for tea or general reefer beverage. So that is what I said. That is what I was saying. Now that being said, we continue with this recitation. The Constitution to the Sovereign Confederation of Mélanger. I am being driven further into an unknown land. The ground becomes harder, the air much sharply cold. Moved by the wind from my unknown goal. The strings quiver in expectation. Still questioning, shall I arrive? Where life rings out. One clear simple note in the silence. At long last the battle is ended, and thus Ghana, your beloved country, At long last the battle is ended, and thus Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. And yet again I want to take the opportunity to thank the chiefs and people of this country, the youth, the tillers, the women, who have so nobly fought and won this battle. Also, I want to thank the valiant ex-servicemen who have so cooperated with me in this mighty task of freeing our country from foreign rule and imperialism. And as I pointed out, I made it quite clear that from now on today, we must change our attitudes, our minds. We must recognize that from now on, we are no further a colonial, but a free and independent people. But also, as I pointed out, that also entails hard work. I am depending upon the millions of the country and the chiefs and people to help me to reshape the destiny of this country. We are prepared to pick it up and make it a nation that will be respected by every nation in the world. We want to build socialism. We have declared that we are supporters of those who strive for peace. We have declared ourselves to be within a group of non-aligned countries, although we are Marxist-Leninists, because the non-aligned countries like ourselves fight imperialism. We want peace. We want to build a better life for our people. That is why we avoid in so much as possible falling into the provocations manufactured by the Yankees. But we know the mentality of those who govern them. They want to make us pay a very high price for that peace. We reply that the price cannot go beyond the bounds of dignity. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. The named is the more of myriad things. Thus, constantly without desire, one observes its essence. Constantly with desire, one observes its manifestations. These two emerge together, but differ in name. The unity is said to be the mystery. Mystery of mysteries, the door to all wonders. Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, most gracious, most merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. Thee do we worship, and thine aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those upon whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, not those whose portion is not wrath, those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. In the beginning of Elohim's creation of the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of Elohim was hovering over the face of the water. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Elohim saw the light, that it was benevolent. And Elohim separated between the light and between the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness Elohim called night. And it was evening, and it was matan, one day. Ahura Mazda spake unto Spitama Zarathustra, saying, I have made every land dear to its dwellers, Spitama Zarathustra, even though it had no charms whatever in it. Had I not made every land dear to its dwellers, Spitama Zarathustra, even though it had no charms whatever in it, then the whole living world would have invaded Aryana Veja. The first of the benevolent lands and countries which I, Ahura Mazda, created was the Aryana Veja, by the benevolent river Daicha. Thereupon came Angrumanyu, who is all death, and he counter-created by his witchcraft the serpent in the river and winter, a work of the Devas. When the Creator, the grand Creator of all things, had finished creating the earth, there were many things the Creator wanted to put there: birds, animals, reptiles, insects, many different living things. The Creator did have certain favorite animals. The Creator particularly liked the panther, Kua Chobi, crawls on 4 legs close to the ground. The panther would sit beside the Creator, and the Creator would pet the panther over and over across its long, soft, furry back. The Creator made sure that certain animals and plants possess unique healing powers. When the Creator touches certain things longer than normal, the Creator's powers automatically go into what the Creator touches. The Creator told the panther, when everything is complete, I would like for you to be first to walk on the earth. You're majestic and beautiful. You have patience and strength. There's something special about you. You are the perfect one to walk the earth first. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Yitzhak, Yitzhak the father of Yaakov, Yaakov the father of Yehuda and his brothers. Yehuda the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Yesse. And Yesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never departing shadow. He abused me, he struck me, he overpowered me, he robbed me. Those who harbor such thoughts do not still their hatred. He abused me, he struck me, he overpowered me, he robbed me. Those who do not harbor such thoughts still their hatred. Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. In the name of God, who is the supreme ruler over all that hath been and all that is to be. The first duty prescribed by God for God's servants is the recognition of Him who is the dayspring of God's revelation and the fountain of God's laws, who represented the Godhead in both the sovereignty of God's cause and the world of creation. Whoso achieveth this duty hath attained unto all benevolence, and whoso is deprived thereof hath gone astray, though he be the author of every righteous deed. It behooveth everyone who reaches this most sublime station, the summit of transcendent glory, to observe every ordinance of God, who is the desire of the world. These twin duties are inseparable. Neither is acceptable without the other. Thus hath it been decreed by God, who is the source of divine inspiration. There is but one and only one Vaheguru, and Vaheguru's existence is eternal. Vaheguru alone is the creator of all there is. Vaheguru is not afraid of anybody or anything, nor does Vaheguru have enmity towards anybody. Vaheguru never dies. Vaheguru's form is timeless and Vaheguru is self-existent. Vaheguru is unborn and free from incarnations. One can realize Vaheguru only through the grace of a spiritual guide, the Guru. Vaheguru exists when there was no beginning. Vaheguru exists even before the beginning of time. Vaheguru exists even now. O Nanak, Vaheguru exists forever. By pondering, one can have a conception of Vaheguru, even though one may ponder over millions of times. Even though one may remain silent for a very long time, yet one cannot control the wanderings of the mind. Even if you fulfill all your desires for worldly comforts and luxuries, your hunger or desire will never be satiated. Millions of similar clever ideas shall be of no avail. How we become true or worthy of union with Vaheguru? How can the distance between human being and Vaheguru be reconciled, and the wall of falsehood which separates us from Vaheguru be demolished? The answer is that we should live according to Vaheguru's command, which, O Nanak, has been written in our destiny from the very beginning. Let a man meditate on the syllable Om, called the Udgita. For the Udgita, a portion of the Samaveda, is sung, beginning with Om. The full account, however, of Om is this. The essence of all beings is the earth. The essence of the earth is water. The essence of water, the plants. The essence of plants, man. The essence of man, speech. The essence of speech, the Rigveda. The essence of the Rigveda, the Samaveda. The essence of the Samaveda, the Udgita, which is Om. That Udgita, Om, is the best of all essences, the highest, deserving the highest place, the eighth. What then is the Rik? What is the Saman? What is the Udgita? This is the question. The Rik indeed is speech, the Saman is breath. The Udgita is the syllable Om. Now speech and breath are Rik and Saman form one couple, and that couple is joined together in the syllable Om. When two people come together, they fulfill each other's desire. Right perception, right knowledge, right conduct constitute the path of liberation. Faith in essential truth is right perception. Right perception arises naturally or by acquisition. Brahm. Ahimsa, mental, verbal, physical. Nonviolence, multiplicity of views, non-possessiveness. Limited vow. Nonviolence vow, truthfulness vow, non-stealing vow, chastity vow, non-possessiveness vow. May the whole world receive the blessing. May all beings help each other. Let the bad deeds be destroyed and all beings become happy. Savamastu Sabe Jagatahe. Om Shantihi, Om Shantihi, Om Shantihi. Jai Jinendra. Long ago, you came to live amongst us, and you spoke like a ghost. Little by little, you learned to imitate our language and to laugh with us. We were young, and at the beginning, you did not know me. Our ways of thinking and our lives were different because you are the son of those other people we call Nepepe. Your professors had not taught you to dream like we do, yet you came to me and you became my friend. You put yourself by my side, and later you wanted to know the words of the Zapiri, whom you call spirits in your language. So I entrusted you with my words, and I asked you to carry them further away to let them be heard by the white people who know nothing about us. We stayed sitting and talking in my house for a long time, despite the horsefly and black fly bites. Few are the white people who have listened to our words in such a way. I gave you my story so that you would answer those who ask themselves what the inhabitants of the forest think. In the past, our elders told them nothing of these things, for they knew that the white people did not understand their language. This is why my words will be new to those willing to hear them. Mélanger. a holy mystic saga, Ahimsa. Forward. When I daven this day, I experience a vision. I sit amongst our ancestors, I recite ancient prayers, yet much in the contemporary language I know with a few of our ancient words. This routine is established for a while. Our ancestors know me by this point, and even accept me slightly, if other than fully. I am recognized as part of the tribe, yet there is little trust towards me. I am still being tested. There are also advocates amongst our ancestors who vouch for me, who experience some revelation of truth within me, to be able to testify on my behalf that I belong. Yet it is a continual process, a continual conversation. Prelude. There is a continuity, singular, universal, where all contradictions are explained, all disagreements are dissolved, all angst is relieved. We know this, yet still it is difficult to believe, continually, consistently. It is an ancient continuity, beyond time, space, energy, thought. Our ancestors know this. Our ancestors share this with us. Our ancestors continue to share this with us, now. It begins, Bereshit, creation, a Big Bang, becoming, Tao, the Word, great mystery. Known by many names, many stories, many people, with many different appearances, natures. This is what begins our saga. Assembly numero uno. The whispers tell us we are from the same source. Our ancestors are the same. This is assembly numero uno. During this assembly, the wisdom is shared, yet something happens. Generations emerge, and our ancestors inhabit different lands with different natures. The wisdom takes form within these natural relationships through language, culture, rituals. Yet the wisdom continues the same within and beyond all this. Epilogue. Today's experience of Melange is an exact continuity of the same ancient experience, wisdom, and legacy of our ancestors. Through generations, our ancestors travel, migrate, and encounter each other. There are wars, yet much further, there is trade, cooperation, learning, and alliances. Our ancestors negotiate between the entrenched tribal leadership hungry for rule over others, and the wisdom of truth, love, modesty, in order for our ancestors to reconcile with each other. Our ancestors prepared progeny for this process of pluralism. This is the vision and continuity of our ancestors. Mixed equilibrium. The core of Melange is the core of being. The unity of truth, love, modesty. Surrounding this is the call of relationship between beings, the golden rule. From this sprouts shared principles and teachings regarding the tangibility of action, communication, and thought. Welt ethos. Melange people. We are a clan. Cousins, uncles, tantas, brothers, sisters, fars, moors, sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, and grands. We are a holy clan, stemming from creation, rooted through the ancients, and continuing for eternity. Panchasilas, Welt ethos, commitment hierarchy. Honesty, sobriety, peace, chastity, sharing. Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Veritas, Haya, Shuma, Kohuga, Samadhi, Shema, Shabono, Narab. Nisamanfo, Academia, Sadaji, Gambaro, forgiveness. Charity, tithing, almshouses, study, vow. With justice for native labor, finance, vegan, health, nature. Mado. Aho. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Welt ethos. Ahimsa, don't start none, won't be none, Sanskrit tradition. Ubuntu, don't starve none, won't be none, Zulu tradition. Veritas, don't story none, won't be none, Greco-Roman tradition. Chaya, the STD none, won't be none, Arabic tradition. Shu, game recognized game, Chinese tradition. Maka, green is the land, Lakota tradition. Huga, blood, cause, Scandinavian tradition. Samadhi, CPT, Pali tradition. Shema, hallelujah, amen, Israeli tradition. Shabono, brother's gonna work it out, Yanomami tradition. Narap, respect, wearing Jerry tradition. Nisamanfo, roots, Twi tradition. Academia, knowledge of self, Greco-Egyptian tradition. Sadaji, the struggle, Iberian tradition. Gambaro, keep your head up, Japanese tradition. Forgiveness, it's all good, Anglo-Saxon tradition. Mado, Aho, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Amen. Mixed Heritage Treaty. I am mixed heritage. My mixed heritage is a communal identity. Our mixed heritage is an ancestral community. Our mixed heritage ancestral community is the entire earth. My personal ancestral lineage is Melange, Israel, Ethiopia, Igbo, Akan, Twi, Muskoki, Celtic, Sverige, Denmark. I join within our Mixed Heritage Treaty. We acknowledge, respect, and support each other's languages, families, clans, tribes, ethnicities, religions, varnas, nationalities, and cultures. We commit to communicate, cooperate, and contribute with our organized collective mixed heritage ancestral community. Our mixed heritage ancestral community narrative includes our ancestral names and teachings of the Rishis, Abraham Avinu, Yitzhak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, Yosef Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, Zarathustra, Arawe, Vyasa, Menelik, the Buddha, Mahavira, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Mencius, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Jesus, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Diganawida, Hayawata, Humboldt, Sunjata, Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji, Martin Luther, Osceola, Baha'u'llah, Tawiti Ragame, Black Elk, Inuit, Diné, Mayan, Inca, Taino. One love and peace. Aho, Mado, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen. Natural Mystic Samadhi. Pausing here. This is not original writing. This is from scriptures that I recite here as well. The citations I share. Natural Mystic Samadhi. Big up. Bhagavad Gita. Sucha Deshi Pratishtapya Shtiram Asana Matmanahi. Nachu Tritam Natinacham Chela Jina Kusotaram. Tatre Kagram Manahi Kridva Yata Chitendriya Kriyahi. Upa Vasyasane Yujad Yogamatma Visudayi. Samam Kayo Shirogravam Darayana Chalam Stirahi. Sam Preksya Nasikagram Svamdisashchana Valokaya. Anapanasati Sutta. Digam va asasanto. Digam asasamiti pajanati. Digam va pasasanto. Digam pasasamiti pajanati. Sur Al-Qasas. Wa mir rahmatihi ja'ala kumul layla wa nahara. La taskanu fihi wa la tabtaku min fadlihi wa la'allakum tashkurun. Bereshit. Vayotze oto ha'chubza. Vayomer habedna hashemayim usfor kol chavim im tuchol isporatam. Vayomer lo kol yeh zarecha. Matthew. Usando corporis es oculus. Si fue oculus tu simplex totum corpus tu lucidum erit. Dao Te Ching. 清朝毛柔物有水，二公间开睫毛巾能行，一其无一字。Natural mystic samadhi, one love. Dao Te Ching. Dao yin wu min. Fu wei dao. Shen de ke cheng. Surah Al-Hujurat. Wa ibadu rahmani lazina yamshuna allal abdi hannanwa. Wa iza bakhamuhu jahunana. Wa iza ba humul jahiluna kalu salam. Vaikra. Kezrach michem yeh lachem hager etchem ve'ahavta lo kamocha ki gaim haytem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Matthew. Omnia ergo quacum que votis ut faciet vobis homines et vos facete es, ha es enim lex e profite. Bhagavad Gita. Savabhutastam atmanam savabhutani chatmani. Ikshate yoga yuktatma savatra samadashaneh. Tviga Sutta. Metta sagatene cetasa ikam disam paridva viharati. Tatadutyam tatatatyam tatachatutyam. Iti udamado tiryam sabadi sabatatya sabavantam lokam. Metta sagatene cetasa vipulena mahagatena apamanena avarena avyapajena paridva viharati. River streams. We are drawn from loving waters' gleams, souls deepened with Tao beyond Dugaphemes, many maven rhythms harmonious of teams, a reservoir from river streams. On northern plains of east a tour, walking lengthy overlooked shore, on Ob Yenesi Lina Amur night beams, a reservoir from river streams. Samadhi plateaus, dynasties, Soleil, Fuji, Liliokalani, Tagalog, Wurundjeri, Ale, Huang, Yangtze, Mekong, character deems, a reservoir from river streams. Offerings, foundations, definitions, beliefs. Holy tributaries feed awakening plant leaves. Ganges, Indus, with healing neems, a reservoir from river streams. Modest trails, enormous hills, west towards inlet a vastness spills. Amadaya Sodaya, treasure trove supremes, a reservoir from river streams. Gardens of faith cradled along banks, spouting prophets, scriptures, religions give thanks. Tigris, Euphrates, Jordan, Philsophidemes, Karims, a reservoir from river streams. From different sides, unity, and Yochnium marches, waltzes with glee. Volga, Danube join, humbleness esteems, a reservoir from river streams. Alpines towards fjords, mighty, wide its hands, beyond possession of logs, ideal plans. Rhineland vegans offer plant-derived creams, a reservoir from river streams. Quiet, with stories from Serengeti big lakes, building pharaohs, pyramids, and Exodus breaks. Fertile Nile roots branching academes, a reservoir from river streams. Ushering empires past steeping cascades, Zambia Zulus above royal bays. Zambezi welcomes home, echoing themes, a reservoir from river streams. In density bush villagers visit, embracing continent, highland backbone exquisite. Congo currents move within a bard's dreams, a reservoir from river streams. Drum beats constant midst delta tides, Timbuktu pages turn, independence decides. Tweed Igbo, greeting Hakeems, a reservoir from river streams. Ancient paths traveled, midst coca, cashews. Conquistadores Republicas Revoluciones, Acá Jabarus. Grinding Inca Shwe redeems, a reservoir from river streams. Big river supports home-carved canoes, rains collected from surrounding hill views. Tucantin Yonomami Orinoco, agua clears what seems, a reservoir from river streams. Parallel paths hold Apache big mountains, from Stampede lands towards Aztecs mines. On Navajo Hopi grass hospitality warmth teems, a reservoir from river streams. Lakota, big mountains, Chinook, big water pier, Tahoma sequoias stand, Tahoma canum stand on either side near. Trickles from Utes witness ever-changing regimes, a reservoir from river streams. Shared vicinity, sides of peaks, spring flowers emerge when yearly thaw speaks. Igloos and sleds of Aleut Inuit, proximate extremes, a reservoir from river streams. Journeys from continent's heart, roots of maize monument tradition start. Nourishing Muskoki, Tainos, Mississippi steams, a reservoir from river streams. Ojibwe, Miami, Turtle Island, big lakes, droplet surge past expansive rapid takes. Midst Cherokee, Haudenosaunee, Algonquin, divine schemes, a reservoir from river streams. We are drawn from loving waters gleams, souls deepened with Tao beyond Dukafims. Many maven rhythms harmonious with teams, a reservoir from river streams. Prayer for all beings. May we each as individuals find the solutions to our own respective challenges and difficulties in life. May we as families, friends, strangers, enemies, and communities better see that all these solutions are interconnected and rely upon each other. May we as a universe better learn how to live with each other through these solutions. And may our example teach these solutions well to our children to better solve the challenges and difficulties of the next 7 generations and beyond. Together, through compassion and love, may we alleviate dukkha and perform tikkun olam. Mado, Aho, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen. To the rivers. Taino, Dine, Mississippi, Cherokee, Haudenosaunee, Algonquin, Inuit, Aleut, Ute, Paiute, Inhopi, Inca, Guarani, Tucantin, Yanomami, Orinoco. Nile, Twi, Igbo, Congo, Zambezi, Euphrates, Tigris, Indus, Ganges, Mekong, Yangtze, Huang, Amur, Lena, Yenisei, Ob, Rhine, Danube, Volga, Sirdaryan, Amodaryan, Jordan, to the hills. Big up Fuji, big up Himalayas, big up Judy Ararat, big up Sinai, big up Kilimanjaro, big up Alps, big up Tahoma, big up Machu Picchu, to the trees. Z, Sagvanam, Zaitun, Arez, Mishita, Ek Oklon, Kanamstik, Ediro Patanga. One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. Give thanks and praise to the one, and we will feel alright. That is the session for today of the Affirmations, the Constitution of the Sovereign Confederation of Melange. See if we can see this joint up here. Oh, you can see it. Oh, that's the moon right there. That's the moon, halfway towards being itself, which it already is, only according to our perception. So, also, and such. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mir, zaijian, adios, te chakris, SMP na asamuje, kiele ofred. One love, peace, happiness, liberation.